Now, you remember when I talked about Athanasius, that he received a young man from Ethiopia who he sent back to Ethiopia as the bishop of the Ethiopian Church. So, and really this is the beginning of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that we know today. It has been in existence since the time of Athanasius, 300, maybe 330, 350 AD, until today. Has a lot of members, not just in Ethiopia now, but also in other parts of the world. That Christianity is shaped by the Greek Orthodox Church. Okay? Up until I think 1969, the Bishop of Alexandria was responsible for appointing leaders for the church in Ethiopia. Right? That meant that the Ethiopian church was really functioning as a branch of the Orthodox Church in Alexandria. Does that make sense? Okay? And therefore, it looks different from us as evangelicals. It behaves different, it thinks different, but it has very long history. When you study Ethiopian Christianity, you will quickly come across and this again is the worldview of the Ethiopians, the fact that they built their churches on hilltops. I mean, if you look for this on Google or on YouTube, there are still churches that people have to climb hills, steep hills, just to get to church. Like 3 hours climbing up a hill, go to church for 3 hours, and take another 3 hours coming down. Because they historically believed that the closer you are to heaven, the more your prayers will be heard. Right? By 500 AD, there came a group of leaders from Syria to Ethiopia. Again, if you are looking at the map, Syria, you just come down the Red Sea and you're in Ethiopia, right? It's not too far away from them. But the Syrian church, because of its Greek Orthodox history, and again because the Ethiopian church is shaped by Alexandria, right? The Syrian church feels close, so they sent a group of leaders, and every one of the leaders ended up planting a church on top of a hill. Right? So a great deal of church history is happening on these hilltops. This is where people have worshipped for generations. Now, as we move forward in that history, we get to a place where the old history of Queen of Sheba and Solomon and her child, she went to Solomon, she came back with a baby, right? And of course, when you read this history, you realize that actually she also went with a maid who also came back with a baby.
Oh.
Right? So, of course, Solomon, you know Solomon was busy.
Is that what you call it?
Very busy.
But over the years, the kingship of Ethiopia would be shared between the descendants of these two children of Solomon and the queen and the servant. Right? And that story continues to shape a great deal of Ethiopian Christianity. At some point in time, the throne was passed from the queen's descendants to the maid's descendants. And when this happens, thank you. When this happens, now actually maybe let me add a line to this story so it makes sense. Because the queen comes back pregnant or with a child, and the maid comes back with a child, there has always been a whole historic connection between Ethiopia and Palestine. Right? The what we now call Ethiopian Jews today. That history goes way, 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 way back, many centuries before Christ. All right? Now, when the descendants of the maid becomes king, he tries to create Ethiopia, Axiom, at this point in time, as the new Jerusalem, right? To the point of actually trying to create the Jordan River, physically create a river in Ethiopia that would represent Jordan River, right? What he does with that is to, of course, create churches, churches that are built out of rocks, right? Rock-hewn churches in Ethiopia. Do you have an image of what that looks like? Do I need to show you what that would look like? Typical churches in the Ethiopian Christianity story look like those, up on mountains, like that one too. But what I was talking about now is these kinds of churches, in which, and again, this is the descendant of the maid, Menelik, who creates 11 of these churches. And his goal was to create 12, right? To really establish the fact that when Jesus returns, this is the Jerusalem that he will go to, not the Jerusalem in Palestine. Does this make sense? Right? He wants to recreate the promised land in Ethiopia. And possibly to help you understand, the Muslims take Jerusalem in 636 AD. Right? So for a whole lot of this time, Jerusalem and the Holy Land is in the control of the Muslims. Okay, so this king wants to create New Jerusalem in Ethiopia that will be the place that Jesus comes to. Okay? Because the Jerusalem in Palestine is not that accessible anymore. No, I need to work with the PowerPoint now. Yeah, we don't have time to get through the details of the history. But as you can see, those are churches on a hill. A rock has been cut down to create a church. Takes a lot of energy, a lot of work, a lot of commitment. And again, maybe just to add to this story, there was, and actually there's still a belief that the Ark of Covenant is kept in one of these churches. That it was taken from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. And so, of course, in these churches, you treat them like you would treat the Holy of Holies in the Old Testament. That there are places where people can't go anymore. And therefore, they don't really know whether the Ark of Covenant is really there or not. But this is the story of African Ethiopian Christianity. Let me see, a lot of notes. Now, there is. I mean, actually, there are stories that say the Bible has been really preserved well in an Ethiopian language, Ge'ez, right? So the Ge'ez Bible, which is really actually just illustrations and images mostly, with some words, but that's still very much and in color it looks beautiful. I've seen a copy once. It looks really beautiful, but it's the Ethiopian capturing of the Christian story. And again, I mean, trying to make it as accessible to their people as possible, right? Tell the story in images. But then there is this other book called Kebra Nagast. It's in Ethiopian Christianity. There are these two. There's the Bible and Kebra Nagast. And Kebra Nagast really is the book that tells the story of kings. It's like the way we have kings in the Bible, right? First and second kings. For them, this is the story of their kings for centuries. And really it goes back to Solomon.
Oh.
Right? And that's why they can claim a Jewish identity. Solomon becomes one of their kings. He becomes their sort of ancestor. Now, you will know that once you connect to Solomon, you connect to David, right? And once you connect to David, you connect to Abraham. You understand? Mm-hmm. So they actually claim, they actually believe that they are descendants of Abraham. Jewish people in Africa. This is a real thing. This is when back in the 1980s, when Ethiopia had famine and many other things, it was really possible for Ethiopian Jews to go home to Palestine and claim that we come from here. And that story of their kings is what is recorded in Kebra Nagast. Again, it's, and of course the Rastafarians have taken hold of that story as well, because for them, it's again their history of how they connect to David, Solomon, David, and Abraham, but then it goes forward and it connects to Haile Selassie, right? So for the Rastafarians, it is also a very, very important book. Again, it's images, colors, but really telling their history. Somebody looking at sort of admiring Kebra Nagast. Okay. Now, all right. Okay. All right. Yeah. We can get out of that. Now, this Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Tewahedo today, right, still very much active in the world. I told you that we have an Ethiopian, we have a Coptic church in Liverpool. We also have an Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Liverpool. Right? Quite active, quite powerful. Now, because the Ethiopians were not colonized like many countries in Africa, their Christianity was kept sort of isolated, right? It did not get the European American influence that will make the rest of African Christianity. Okay. There was a time back when the Portuguese were going to India, that they brought missionaries to Ethiopia. And those missionaries were sent back. And they were told to report to the Pope that we have been Christian much longer than you. What can you bring us? You want to convert us? We are Jewish by blood. Right? So it creates a kind of Christianity that looks very much like the Orthodox Church that has not been influenced by Westerners, Europeans, Americans. And then in the past 50 years or so, we are now beginning to see the evangelical church begin to emerge in Ethiopia. The Lutheran church is quite big, Mekane Jesus Church. Of course, the Orthodox Tewahedo is again, as I said, is quite big. But something is happening in Ethiopia that has impact for the rest of the continent. It's where the African Union sits, right? It's an important country, and its Christianity is important for the continent. That we cannot really know African Christianity without thinking about Ethiopian Orthodox Church. It's important. Yes, there's a Coptic church in Egypt, but there's an Ethiopian church in Ethiopia that begins to translate what's going on in the Orthodox Church for Africa.
Sorry, sir.
I just want the meaning of Orthodox.
Yes. Orthodox is really, the word itself means right thinking, right knowledge, right understanding, or things of that sort. But when we use it in the sense that we're using it, Greek Orthodox Church or Greek or Ethiopian Orthodox Church, it's really just describing a type of a church that's different from other churches. Right? When Christians fight against heresy, really what they're trying to do is to protect the right doctrine, protect orthodoxy. Right? So orthodoxy can be in a way it's about the right way of doing things.
The one that's still standing.
Sorry?
The one that's still standing.
Yes. So, just like when we say Roman Catholic Church, right? Catholic is simply a word that means universal. Okay? In the creed again, we talk about I believe in the church, one holy and apostolic, right? It's the one there in some creeds is universal, right, or Catholic. It's just a word describing something that the church is, right? And so it's the same for Orthodox. That is just describing. It's like a descriptor of what the church is. While in Rome and in the West, they hold on to the universality of the church, the Catholicity, the fact that the church is Catholic, and therefore it's universal. It's in Rome, but it's also in all parts of the world. The Eastern Church, Greek, holds on to orthodoxy, right standing, right believing, right this, right, and both those words appear very early in the story. As I said earlier, it's just that a great deal of our history comes from the western part of the church, from Rome, from the Romans, and from the Protestants, the Reformation, and comes from European missionaries and American missionaries. And so we hear more about that story than we hear about the story of what's happening in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Make sense? Okay. Now, again, if I go to the PowerPoint, it's going to be a lot longer than it really needs to be. But somewhere between Egypt and Ethiopia, there is Sudan, right? And Sudan was originally known as Nubia, right? Nubia, Nubia. Right? Now, around 500 AD, the emperor in Constantinople, emperor and his wife, they were both emperors, which was quite unique for them, but the wife was also emperor, was co-emperor. They believed somewhat differently, And again, this will make sense if we dig into the Greek, but let's not bother with that for now. And therefore, they competed on sending missionaries. The husband sent missionaries somewhere else, the wife sent missionaries somewhere else. The husband is Justinian, the wife is Theodora. And the wife sends missionaries to Sudan around 540 AD. They come to Sudan, they create a good Christian community. 3 kingdoms, 3 small kingdoms in the area become Christian. So you end up with a good Christian population in Sudan, right? This church is supported by Egypt for a bit, and then it turns around and supports Egypt, the Coptic Church, the Alexandrian Church, and it really thrives to be a good Christian community. Okay? This Christian community, when Islam emerges and it conquers Egypt, right? They try to come down and conquer Nubia as well. And the Nubians were able to repel the Muslims, at least at the beginning. So they do not really get overrun by the Muslims. And the Muslims require 2 things from them. They tell the Nubians that 1, you must have a mosque at the center of your city so that when our people are traveling, they can have a place to pray. And 2, because we will not attack you, you need to give us 360 slaves every year. And of course, that happens for at least 700 years. All right? Now, by 1400s, these Christian kingdoms in Sudan, in Nubia, had reached a place where they had so much intermarried with the Muslims to the point where the kingdoms collapse and their Christianity is overrun by the Muslims. They could not do it by force back in 500 AD. In 1500 AD, they do it really by marriage. That's what the books say. But this is the most interesting part of this story. All this history about the church in Sudan gets buried in the sands, literally, so that nobody knows about the church in Sudan up until the 1960s when they were digging up Lake Nasser. That's when they hit something and they realize in the sands, buried in the sand, and they realize, oh, it's a wall of a cathedral. Right? Like all this brilliant history of Christian community that existed for 1,000 years, gone. And so they discover, actually, there was a church here. One of the key documents of that history is the wall of the cathedral that had been buried in the sand, right? That contained names of bishops of that church. Like 28 or 30 names of bishops with the times that they were serving that church. Now, again, if you want to learn that history today, if you want to look at that war today, you have to go to Poland. Because that's where it's located. They took everything and set it up in Poland. So the whole museum of this story is in Poland.
Why in Poland?
Because the people who were doing the digging were Polish. So, yes, again, a whole history of 1,000 years of Christianity that nobody knows about up until they discover it in the science. Then they immediately discover, actually, there are many cathedrals here. It's not just this one. All right? Yeah. Questions, comments?
So I just for clarity. So the Nubian church was also an Orthodox, both Greek Orthodox and Coptic, or it was just a blend of its own, or does it have also a relationship with the Ethiopian Orthodox? I would want to.
It's Orthodox because, again, it's a result of the missionary work of the Pope, of the Emperor in Constantinople. It's on the Orthodox side of the church. As it is located between Ethiopia and Egypt, actually it's being influenced both ways. Right? So as I said, when the Muslims conquered the Christians in Egypt, the Nubians went in to help and provide food and shelter and all these things to help the Egyptian church. And when things were difficult for the Nubians, the Egyptian Christians would come and help. And they do the same with Ethiopia. So they're sort of working together. It's this band of Orthodox Christianity in Africa from Egypt to Nubia, Sudan to Ethiopia.
Even today, the head of the Greek Orthodox Church is in Alexandria.
Oh, right. Okay, I
So
think
they have an Orthodox Church here, but the head
yes.
comes from
Alexandria.
Alexandria.
You heard that, right?
I also asked this out of curiosity when you spoke of the Ethiopian. It's like I get nowhere too. Like there are those from Sheba, from Queen Sheba, who also started the Christianity, and there is this other guy from Egypt who went to Athanasius and came back for that church, who became Sir Bishop there. So.
No, so the connection with the Queen of Sheba is that, as I said, she went to Solomon with a maid, and they both came back with children, and that creates a Jewish community in Ethiopia that will be in their millions by the time the story of the Ethiopian eunuch shows up, right? They are not Christians, at least not yet, but they are Jews. And that makes it possible that when Christianity emerges, it has a landing point among the Ethiopian Jews. All right? And then they get to a place where they begin to say, we are the new Jerusalem, we are the new Israel, because the Muslims have taken over the Palestine. Let's create here a Jerusalem that Jesus will come to. Yeah. Sure.
Very thoughtful.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, these are histories and stories that mean a lot for, not just for Africa, but for Christianity as a whole. I mean, that story of the Nubian church, 1,000 years of solid existence, and then it's gone, and nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about it until they are creating a dam and they find walls of a cathedral. Any questions? Now, what are we trying to do with all these stories? It's really to show that Christianity is not a foreign religion in Africa, right? It's not. It has been here in Africa for 2,000 years. Actually, when I showed the PowerPoint in the last hour, and I showed you those two books, the book about how Africa shaped the Christian mind really tells the story of actually how African Christianity shaped what we call Christianity in Europe today. From monasticism, of course, as we have talked about with St. Anthony, but even the idea of a university, right, comes out of Africa and is adopted into Europe.
So was Alexandria basically the first university? No, the Greeks would have had similar
Gymnasiums and things of that sort. But yeah, Alexandria would, especially because of its library. The library in Alexandria was the largest library in the world for a long time. So this culture of reading, the culture of collecting books, that shapes European universities today, is really a result of African Christianity.
Just asking, the Nubian church, did it end there, Nubian, after that 1,000 years? Because as we heard from the Maasai Creed, people of Safari, and I think this Nilotic, those tendencies of working across. Is there anything relating to down East Africa, down to the south, because these are Nilotic? Yeah.
No, I've not seen anything in that regard, but I mean that's a good research question. Did it just end up in Sudan? Did it come down the Nile? Because those three kingdoms were right on the Nile River. And it's possible that it came down there. Very possible.
So maybe you should just put the recording. Can you just repeat the question for the recording?
Okay.
Yeah, I was asking, we know these are Nairobi. Yes. We know that these are Nairobi when we hear of the church in Nubia. Did it end there in Nubia, or they came across to other parts in the East African parts, in the other parts of Africa?
Yeah, and my answer was that it is possible, but I've not seen any materials to that effect. Could be a research project that somebody would pick up. Now, one of the things that we see in that book, How Africa Shaped the Christian Mind, is a constant plea by the author saying, can young Africans please begin to research this history? Of course, the author is an American. He wrote quite a lot on North African Christianity. But he says, as an American, it's not my place to be telling these stories. It's the place for the African church to be researching this history and telling it with their own people. So that, again, and he's speaking as an American, he says, because we need a confident African church. We need an African church that knows itself and knows the gifts that God has given it. So, again, maybe one of you would be courageous enough to research that connection between then and here today.
They'd have a good supervisor too.